For centuries, behind the golden walls of the Empire of Shuan, history wasn't written only with weapons. It was etched in whispers of seduction and luxury. The emperors who ruled the vast lands of Shuan were meant to be symbols of strength, wisdom, and justice. But some rulers chose a different legacy, one soaked in indulgence and obsession. They weren't remembered for their reforms or conquests, but for the empires they allowed to rot while they chased pleasure behind silk curtains. This is the untold story of Xi'an's most hedonistic emperors, men who abandoned duty for desire, who drowned in decadence while their dynasties crumbled around them. Power, passion, and the fall of nations, because sometimes the strongest empires don't fall to swords. They fall to temptation. Now, let's step into the shadowed chambers of emperors whose nights burned with excess and whose days vanished into neglect. Have you ever wondered who was the most lust-driven emperor in the history of Shuan? Their lives were wrapped in mystery, but today, we're peeling back the silk to reveal the scandalous truth. These weren't just rulers, they were men who presided over vast harems with thousands of women, endless festivals, and rumors of nightly marathons of desire. The title alone, the most lustful emperor in Xi'an's history, raises eyebrows for a reason. And before we name him, we need to understand the world he lived in the imperial courts of ancient Shuan. Concubines weren't merely a luxury, they were seen as a ruler's duty. Producing heirs wasn't a personal matter, it was a national responsibility. The emperor had to secure the future of the dynasty, and that meant having many women. It was written into the job. But what began as political strategy quickly spiraled into obsession. Some emperors got so lost in their personal indulgences they abandoned the realm completely. While outside the palace walls, famine spread and rebellions brewed, they stayed, hidden in golden cages of their own, design-chasing lust while their legacies burned. In the next part, we'll meet one such emperor, the man who built the largest harem in imperial history, and let goats decide who shared his bed. One of the earliest and most outrageous examples of unchecked imperial indulgence comes from Emperor Dalan of the Zun dynasty. His real name was Shen Dalan, and although he may not be as widely known as some other rulers, his appetite for pleasure earned him a place in history that few could rival. When Dalan took the throne in 266 CE, he found the grand halls of the palace empty not of gold or guards, but of companionship. So, he devised a plan. He sent envoys across the empire, combing every province for the most beautiful unmarried girls to bring back to his capital. These young women, often just teenagers, were plucked from their homes and transported to the imperial palace to become members of his harem. The result was staggering. Emperor Dalan's harem grew to over 10,000 women, turning the palace into something more like a royal pleasure complex than a center of governance. Endless corridors were converted into personal chambers, each one assigned to a concubine waiting for the emperor's call. With thousands of women to choose from, even the emperor himself couldn't keep track of them all, so he came up with something truly bizarre. Dalan had a golden carriage specially built, drawn by 3 white goats. Each evening, he would climb aboard, and the goats would be set loose inside the palace grounds. Wherever the goats stopped, that was the room of the concubine chosen to spend the night with the emperor. This became a nightly ritual strange, animal-led lottery where the fate of thousands of women depended on the whim of hungry goats. Each night, young women sat in silence behind their gilded doors, holding their breath, waiting for the faint sound of bells. If the goats stopped at your door, you were chosen. If they passed you by, you waited, sometimes for weeks, months, even years. The story doesn't end there. After Dalan conquered the rival state of Yuwu, he didn't just claim their land, he also absorbed the former emperor's harem. Thousands more women were added to his collection, making Dalan's imperial harem the largest in the entire history of Shuan, despite the impossible numbers. Legends claim Dalan had an almost supernatural stamina. He became known not for his laws or leadership, but for his relentless pursuit of pleasure. While other emperors led armies and expanded borders, Dalan focused on his goat-led bedroom rituals, blissfully unaware that his empire was quietly beginning to unravel from within. Next, We'll meet another emperor who rivaled Dalin's excess not with numbers, but with intensity. A man who didn't just indulge in pleasure, but was said to have died from it. Now let's turn to another legendary figure in the empire's parade of excess, Emperor Lejun of the Hanwu dynasty. His real name was Ruo Lejun, compared to Emperor Ruwu, compared to Emperor Dalin's monstrous harem of 10,000 concubines. Lejun's collection of 3,000 women might seem modest, but don't be fooled, his reign was no less scandalous. Lejun came to power with a promising reputation. As a young man, he was praised for his intelligence, charm, and refined manners. His grandfather, Emperor Zunran, had been one of the most respected leaders in the Hanwu lineage. Hopes were high that Lejun would follow in his footsteps, but once he ascended the throne, everything changed. Lejun became consumed by his own desires. Governing the empire took a back seat as he plunged into a world of nightly indulgence. Obsession with women became legendary. According to palace records, every single night the emperor would visit 2 different chambers. He reportedly sustained this routine with the help of an herbal elixir, so-called ancient stamina potion that enhanced his vigor far beyond normal human limits. It didn't take long before Emperor Lejun became more famous for his romantic escapades than for any political achievement. Some ancient accounts claim he died from sheer exhaustion after years of entertaining his concubines. Whether that's fact or folklore, it shows just how wild his reign truly was. Like Dalin, Lejun also used the justification of duty to defend his behavior. More concubines meant more heirs, which supposedly ensured the future of the dynasty. But in practice, that theory fell apart. While Lejun lost himself in the pleasures of the palace, the outside world suffered. Famine spread across provinces, corruption ran rampant through the government, and uprisings simmered among the people. But inside the imperial court, the music played on. Lavish banquets, sensual performances, new consorts arriving each month. Lejun remained in his fantasy, deaf to the cries beyond the palace walls. Ministers who tried to advise him were exiled or executed. Warnings were ignored, and in place of wise counsel, the emperor surrounded himself with sycophants who encouraged his extravagance. What started as personal indulgence became national tragedy. Emperor Lejun, like Dalin before him, stands as a powerful example of how unchecked desire can erode even the strongest thrones. And as we'll see in the next part, things were about to get even worse. To understand just how deep this culture of indulgence ran, we need to step back and look at the system itself, the machine that enabled emperors like Dalin and Lejun to drown in decadence while their people starved. In the empire of Shun, having hundreds or even thousands of concubines wasn't merely tolerated, it was institutionalized. According to ancient governance texts, like the Codex of Zhao, the emperor was expected to maintain a structured harem. The ideal breakdown included 9 elite consorts, 27 mid-tier companions, and 81 lower-ranked concubines, a total of 117 women. But that was just the guideline. In reality, most emperors threw the rulebook aside. As dynasties grew more powerful, so did their harems. By the late Hanwu and early Tangren eras, the numbers spiraled into insanity. During the reign of Emperor Zhaokun of the Hanwu line, historical records mention over 20,000 women living within the palace walls. A generation later, Emperor Minghua of the Tangren dynasty reportedly kept 40,000 concubines under one roof. By that point, the imperial harem was no longer a private affair. It was a self-contained city and empire within an empire ruled by beauty, rivalry, and quiet despair. But these women didn't appear out of nowhere. Every 3 years, the government launched a national consort draft. Girls between the ages of 14 and 16 from every province were summoned to the capital for inspection. Their looks, background, manners, intelligence, everything was scrutinized. The best were chosen to enter the palace, and sometimes beauty wasn't even the priority. Some women were selected for their wit, political connections, or family influence. It turned the harem into a strange mixture of romance, strategy, and survival. Still, behind all the luxury and opulence was a cruel truth. Most of these women would never even meet the emperor. There were too many. Only a chosen few were selected through a tightly controlled rotation system known as the 15-night cycle. It worked like this. During each cycle, the emperor was scheduled to sleep with the empress once, 3 top-tier consorts, 27 mid-ranked concubines, and 81 lower-ranked women. That's 112 women over 15 nights, and that was only a fraction. Thousands of women spent their lives waiting, hoping for their moment, often dying in silence without ever seeing the man they were forced to serve. For many, the imperial palace was not a dream. It was a gilded cage. Their lives were measured in glances, whispers, the sound of footsteps that passed them by. This reality wasn't lost on the poets of the time. By G, the Tangranera writer, captured the sorrow in a famous verse, "Among 3,000 blossoms, only one draws the gaze. The others bloom unseen, wither unheard." In one of his most powerful works, The Song of Endless Sorrow, Bai described Emperor Minghua's infatuation with his favorite concubine, Lady Anli. While the empire burned, the emperor gave all his love to one woman, ignoring the rest. His neglect would ultimately lead to political chaos and tragedy. It's a pattern that would repeat again and again. Emperors who mistook obsession for strength, palaces filled with forgotten dreams. In the final part, we meet the emperor, who took this descent to its lowest point, the man whose reign shattered the dynasty he was meant to protect. Among all the emperors who let their kingdoms slip away under the weight of pleasure, none fell harder than Emperor Zhuanqi of the Hanwu Dynasty. His birth name was Jin Zhuanqi, and he ruled from 146 to 168 CE, unlike his ancestors. He wasn't remembered for military brilliance or reform. His reign became the darkest chapter in his dynasty's history. Zhuanqi's obsession with pleasure knew no boundaries. His harem overflowed, his parties never ended, and his focus on governing was non-existent. While rebellions stirred in the provinces, famine spread through villages, and officials cried for reform, the emperor remained locked inside his pleasure palace, surrounded by dancers, wine, and silk. Advisors who spoke out were quickly silenced, some exiled, others forced into suicide. The emperor replaced competent ministers with corrupt eunuchs and opportunists who whispered what he wanted to hear while they drained the empire's coffers. The court, once a place of strategy and statecraft, became a den of conspirators and flirt. Meanwhile, the people suffered. Zhuanqi's answer to unrest: bigger feasts, more concubines, louder music. He drowned out the cries of the empire with noise and narcotics. By the end of his reign, the central government was collapsing. Corruption was no longer a secret, it was policy. Rebellions erupted, the military lost discipline, public lost faith. And inside the palace, Zhuanqi danced on, blind to the storm outside. His successor, Emperor Lingui, continued the same disastrous pattern. More concubines, more eunuchs, less responsibility. And with that, the mighty Hanwu dynasty came to an end. By 220 CE, the empire that once led the world in culture, science, and strength had disintegrated. Not because of war from outside, but wrought from within. What can we learn from this? It's easy to laugh at the goat-powered carriages, the love potions, and the emperors who tried to sleep with thousands of women. But beneath the scandal is a warning that still echoes today. Power without restraint is a poison. Pleasure without responsibility leads to collapse. These emperors weren't just men with too many concubines. They were symbols of what happens when leaders serve themselves instead of their people. And it wasn't just shoe-in. Look through history: Rome, Byzantium, Europe's monarchies. The pattern is the same. When rulers trade duty for indulgence, nations fall. Now think about those women, taken at 14, locked behind gold gates, competing endlessly for the gaze of a man they might never see. Many spent their entire lives in silence, surrounded by luxury, but forgotten by history. Even those who caught the emperor's eye, like Lady Anli of the Tangranera, were not safe. Manipulation and tragedy followed them. The emperors' obsession often led to their ruin too. In the end, these tales aren't just ancient gossip. They are timeless truths. Power is fragile. Pleasure is fleeting. And when leaders forget their purpose, even the greatest empires fall. So the next time you hear about emperors with 10,000 lovers, goat-chosen concubines, and endless royal parties, remember beneath the silk sheets and palace lights, there were empires collapsing in silence.